Psych! That's the wrong number!
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Welcome, everybody, and happy 4th of July. It's so good to be welcome back for another week of History Group. I hope you enjoyed our debate last week between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Now we're going to do something a little more fun, and we're going to be celebrating each of our top 10 favorite Americans to ever live. And I'm proud to be an American in no particular order. Before we get started, let's go over some rules. Maddie will go first. Maddie will have 2 minutes per entry, and then she will give an honorable mention list, and then it will be my turn. Thank you.
Yep. Let's get into it. Whoops. Happy 4th of July.
And I'm proud to be an American.
Well, Daniel did this kind of in reverse. Typically, I do announcements and then introduce what it is. Daniel introduced what it is. But hey, we don't have any announcements, so screw it. Let's get into it. My picks in no particular order. This is I can't remember if you said I have not seen Daniel's picks. Daniel hasn't seen mine. So this is going to be his first time seeing my top 10. Starting off, we have Bill Gates. Why Bill Gates? Well, he's rich. That's the American dream. Okay. He founded a company based on something he was good at, used the capitalist structure to create what came very close to being a monopoly and kind of was a monopoly. Then he had to use his own money to give money to his competitor, who I believe he still makes more money than. Plus, he's just a good guy. He gives a ton of money to charity, to fight hunger in Africa and different things like that. Got anything to say about Bill Gates, Dan?
I like his glasses.
He, years and years ago, he did the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge.
Throwback.
That's why I chose him. Let's see. You ready to move on? Ben Franklin. I figured, okay, well, I have to include one of the founding fathers, okay? So I went with Ben Franklin. Why? Because the man was very smart, not only with politics, he was also very scientifically smart. You know, he could speak multiple languages. He was an inventor. He was the kind of guy you would want to hang out with, you know? Just a personal man. Plus, he's on the hundo, so doesn't get much more American than that. Anything yet, Daniel?
I think Benjamin Franklin's most iconic decade was the time he spent in France.
Agreed. MLK, obvious reasons. Okay, guys. Civil rights leader, fought for equality, and he did so through peaceful means, even when what he was saying was extremely unpopular. I think any top 10 Americans list without MLK is wrong.
I agree. MLK is indispensable.
Okay. We might have a repeat on Daniel's list. Teddy. In my list of favorite presidents, Teddy typically goes at the top because of multiple reasons. One, his war career is incredible. He, I believe, is the only president that has the Medal of Honor. He pretty much did his own thing in the war. He didn't take crap from anyone. And then he was a big conservationist, which is big for me because I really enjoy camping. So having conservation work and the expansion of the park system was very admirable. He also led the progressive movement, which ensured a lot of regulations and protections for workers and consumers, which I think really helped ensure capitalism for the long haul, even if it was a toned down version of capitalism.
Another person with top-notch glasses.
The glasses are on fleek, as they said in my generation. Sojourner Truth, another civil rights activist. Now, I considered a few people under the abolition movement, people that tried to get rid of slavery in America. And I landed on Sojourner Truth because not only was she an abolitionist, she believed in anti-slavery, she also just believed in women's rights. Her famous slogan is "Ain't I a woman?" Because when people would discuss women's rights, they would leave out black women's rights. And her response to that was, "Ain't I a woman? A black woman is just as much a woman as a white woman. A black person is just as much a person as a white person." So I feel like, again, the abolition of slavery, which was a huge problem in American history, somebody needs to be featured on that list. Dan.
I agree. I have someone who fought for similar ideals on my list.
Oh, okay. We're on to something. Abe. This is one of the ones I'm pretty sure is on both of our lists. He held the Union together. As far as great Americans go, you have to, what is a great American? Somebody who believes in America. And I think nobody really believed in America more than Lincoln. He fought the war to keep America unified. And in my opinion, he fought on the correct side of that war. Dan.
Everything you just said was no cap.
Lincoln.
Straight fire.
Lincoln was mega bussin' back in the day.
On God.
On God. Ulysses S. Grant. If you were to say, Madeline, who are your top presidents? I said Teddy. Ulysses S. Grant is another one that I absolutely love. In third grade, I wrote a report on him, and I fell in love with him, and I'm still in love to this day. Grant never wanted to be president. He was a Civil War general. He fought under Lincoln for the Union, right? And then after the war, America was like, okay, well, we need somebody to be president. And a lot of people said, Grant, we want you to be president. And he said, absolutely not. Like, that sounds like the worst job you could possibly have in this country. But then he looked around and he said, everyone else I know would be absolute dog water at that job. So he volunteered. And I find that very admirable of him. He did 2 terms. He never wanted to be president. He did not like it. Dan.
This is a fantastic pick. Ulysses S. Grant on presidential rankings is typically ranked towards the end, which is a disgrace. Grant not only wiped out the Ku Klux Klan in the South during his presidency, he also came from nothing. In the span of like 3 years, he went from being I can't remember if it was a leather shop worker with his dad to being the leader of the Union Army. That's pretty crazy. I love a good underdog story, and Grant is certainly that.
All right. Now,
sorry, I don't mean to butt in on your list, but also he was an abolitionist way before many U.S. presidents ever were. So that's really cool.
If I'm remembering correctly, for like one of his first anniversaries with his wives or something, his in-laws bought him and his wife a slave. And the slave got to their land, and he was like, well, I don't believe in slavery, so here's your freedom. Gave him the paperwork, and off he went. He was a free man. His in-laws were not happy, but he was. So now I've got 3 presidents on my list, so I don't think I'm putting in any more, because that'd be president heavy, I think. Barbara Walters. I think I might just make a compilation of all my favorite Barbara Walters moments and put it in this video. But I think, she was in journalism for over 50 years. She remains completely objective, I think. She did interviews with a lot of people, a lot of them enemies of the United States even. She sat down with Al Gaddafi. She interviewed Putin. She interviewed Dick Cheney. You know, um, but she remained objective. She remained civil, even when civil discourse would happen on shows that she was on, especially The View. She would take a moment and say, "Hey, this is not what these conversations are supposed to be like. People can disagree with each other and still be civil." She is interviewed. I mean, she's dead now, but she's interviewed every president from Nixon all the way to Biden. Biden was before he was in office, but still, she was able to get an interview with every president. She was the first female to anchor a major news broadcast. So I think she gave integrity to the American news system, even as it was losing its integrity. Dan. George Lucas. This one's more on the entertainment side. Hear me out. I know a lot of you guys don't like Star Wars, which is a terrible take, by the way. But George Lucas was able to take ideas of government, society, state politics, and make it into the most successful movie franchise of all times. You know, he's been asked several times if his movies are a political statement, and he kind of says, like, well, of course they're political statements, but not in the way you think. It's not, you know, Star Wars isn't advertising for a certain candidate. It's just, but it is educating people on what different governments can do and how the government can lie and transform right before your eyes. Dan.
I really like him, and he's got great glasses.
Dan, who's your favorite character in Star Wars?
Han Solo.
Oh,
Not even close.
wow. Okay.
Who's yours?
I'd go with Qui-Gon Jinn.
Oh, love Qui-Gon.
I think the classic picks are Anakin, who I could get behind, right? Or Obi-Wan.
Oh,
I'm a big anti Obi-Wan person. I think Obi-Wan did terrible. He was given the chosen one, and he made the chosen one go to evil. All he needed.
I'm sorry. Who killed kids?
Not Qui-Gon Jinn. I tell you, had Qui-Gon Jinn been in charge of Anakin's training, you wouldn't have needed movies 4 and up. You know, movie 3 would have happened, and there would have been peace forever in the galaxy. Rest in peace, Qui-Gon Jinn. Of course, the best American. What's so great about America, Dan? Individuality. Okay. And nothing gives individuality more than each individual American. So I think each of you, including you, Dan, are some of the best Americans ever because you're living your own truth in a true American way. In 2006, Time Magazine made you the person of the year. Most of you weren't there, so you didn't qualify. But, you know, hey, it is what it is. To my honorable mentions, wrap up my portion of this one. Chief Joseph, he led the Nez Perce people as the U.S. government encroached on native lands, and he tried to get his people to safety. Ultimately, he made the decision to surrender when he realized it was doing more harm than good, and America still completely wronged him. So I think he was a very admirable person to look up to as far as American history and Native American history goes. The next 3 are presidents: Washington, FDR, and Obama. Washington, first president, that's pretty admirable. FDR, leading the nation through World War II and the Great Depression. I think, you know, he deserves some credit for that. Barack Obama, because, you know, the first African-American president, I think that's just an admirable thing. The next 3, also in entertainment or news: Tom Hanks, Jon Stewart, Walter Cronkite. I just like him. You know what I'm saying? Walter Cronkite, more similar to Barbara Walters, but Jon Stewart, I think he's hilarious. I also think he's a genuinely good person. Tom Hanks, less hilarious, but still a good person and very entertaining to watch on the big screen. And then the Wright brothers, they invented airplanes. And had they not invented the airplane, my early adulthood would have been spent unemployed. Daniel, you're up.
Well, thank you, Maddie.
No problem.
I must say from your honorable mentions list, besides Washington, of course, who
Right.
I think was instrumental to keeping us free, I really like Obama. I don't think I've ever felt more represented on the global stage than when Obama was president, because regardless of whether you agree with his politics or not, Obama was probably the greatest speaker in modern American history. He was young. He's not dead. He's very intelligent. And I just think that he represented America's interests well, and people took him seriously on the world stage. So good, honorable picks. Now,
Thank
I must say, before I begin mine, two disclaimers. One, I can't remember the order I put them in, so I'm going to be as surprised as you are. Second, mine maybe are a little less serious than Maddie, but I went a little bit of a different direction, and that doesn't mean mine is better or worse than Maddie's. It just means it's different. I attempted to pick 10 Americans that I think encompass the American spirit above else. And what is the American spirit? I guess we'll find out. So we can go ahead and get started with number one. Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Now, Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken in a town a couple miles south of Lexington, Kentucky. And, you know, if you just look at him, he really just inspires you to make good fried chicken. And one thing that America does better than any other country is fried chicken. And he also represents the entrepreneurial spirit. And that's American.
Two things. One, not a real colonel. And two, nice glasses.
Yes, he's not a real colonel.
Just the chicken colonel.
Moving on. Abraham Lincoln. This is, I believe, the only crossover between our two lists. Abraham Lincoln is the greatest president in U.S. history. I think that ends with a period, not a question mark. Lincoln, as Maddie put it, believed in America like none other did. He fought to save the idea that a country governed by men for the purpose of men, and I'm using men as in terms of mankind, not in terms of men. It's a beautiful thing, and it's something I think we take for granted in society today. Without Lincoln, we probably would be living in a very different country than we do today. We might not have even had a civil war. We might have just gone our separate ways, and we'd have two countries in the North American area that represents the United States. So Lincoln fought to preserve American democracy, and I think he should be enshrined as the greatest American president.
Agreed.
Robert Downey Jr. Now, talking about entertainment, right? RDJ is a great story about how to build your life back better. RDJ had a famous father who was a filmmaker, and when he was young, he was a good actor, but he got into trouble with the law, and he had a lot of depressive years, but he fought back like none other. And in 2008, the picture from here, he got cast as Iron Man, and he's now one of the most popular actors in the country. That's really inspiring, and there's not many places in the world where you could do that. You could go from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs in the span of a decade. Robert Downey Jr. is someone that I think kids can look up to and Americans can look up to as a great American actor.
I actually totally agree. I thought this was a joke when I first saw it. But now that I'm, after what you say and me recollecting his story, he does have a truly American tale of success. And I mean, I admire him. He did go from nothing to a big success.
Yes, and he just won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. So, round of applause for RDJ. Next, Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman is hopefully soon to be on the $20 bill. She should be. She deserves it a lot more than the person who's currently on it. Harriet Tubman is an inspiration. Probably most famous, definitely most famous for the Underground Railroad and her work to help those who needed help in the Civil War era, right? Helping people escape from the slave society South into the more free North, where they could hopefully be granted the freedom that they had earned, right? That's a truly inspiring American story, right? Helping others when you know it's the right thing to do, because she was putting herself in danger. There's many good documentaries about Harriet Tubman. There's also a movie that came out recently about her. It's just called Harriet, and both documentaries and the movie do a really good job of portraying her as she was and who she was as a person. And yeah, I think she encompasses the American spirit well. And I also don't think that the progress that people like MLK, John Lewis, Malcolm X fought for in the 1960s would have been possible without the sacrifices of people like Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. Thoughts?
Again, totally agree.
Fred Rogers. Now, the end of the 20th century was a difficult time for a lot of people, and moving into the 21st century, it's probably even more difficult. And if you go back and watch clips of Fred Rogers, maybe that worry goes away a little bit. Fred Rogers was really interesting too because he is this entertainer, right? He hosts a children's show, but he's talking about very serious things. He also helped the Black community during difficult times by having Black characters on his TV show to kind of push the message that, yeah, Black people deserve just as much acceptance in society as white people, right? And this is, of course, following the civil rights era. There's a lot of animosity in society, and Rogers treated everybody, regardless of what they looked like or their backgrounds, with kindness. And that is something that I think is often neglected in the American story, right? We hear about its grit and its toughness and its ruthlessness, but I think moving forward, the American spirit should adopt a more Fred Rogers-like kindness.
I agree. Rogers had a much softer and more compassionate approach to what it means to be an American. Yeah, and I can admire that.
Next, Sandra Day O'Connor. Now, for those of you who don't know who Sandra Day O'Connor is, she was the first female justice of the Supreme Court. She was appointed in the 1980s. And why is she on this list? Well, first of all, the Supreme Court has existed since 1789. From 1789 until the 1980s, it was a room full of men. To be a woman going into that courtroom, it must have been scary, right? I would imagine O'Connor felt that she wouldn't be taken seriously, that her opinions would be neglected. But she persevered, and she was on the court until the 2000s, delivering some brilliant opinions and also not afraid to speak her truth when it wasn't popular. She was known for some of her fierce dissents, and she really paved the way for what would come. Right, shortly after O'Connor, we got the great Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who I was tempted to put on this list, but I opted to go with O'Connor since she truly trailblazed the court for women. And then, of course, in the 2000s, we got, I think, 3 more female justices, and now 4 of the 9 justices on the court are female. And that is something to celebrate, something that probably would not be possible without O'Connor.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. Another thing I really like about O'Connor is most Supreme Court justices come from Harvard or Yale. Sorry, I can come from Harvard or Yale. Sandra Day O'Connor graduated from Arizona State for her law degree. So to have somebody move through the ranks of being an attorney and later a judge, not being from such a prestigious law school, says a lot. And I believe the law school at Arizona State now is named after her as well.
Really?
I believe so.
That's cool. I mean, I would sure hope so, right? But that's really cool. John frickin' Lewis. John Lewis might be my favorite American of all time. I was debating when I was putting this list together because I wanted to diversify this list. So What civil rights era leader did I want to put on this list? And the obvious answer, I think, is MLK, which he's on my honorable mentions. And of course, MLK's I Have a Dream speech on the March on Washington is maybe the greatest American speech of all time. It's certainly in the top 5. But John Lewis is often forgotten in this conversation. John Lewis also spoke at the March on Washington. His speech is just as good, I would argue, as MLK's, although it takes a different message. John Lewis talks about we have no time for waiting, right? The time is now. And he just passed away in 2020. He never stopped fighting for equal rights, civil rights. He worked on RFK's campaign for the presidency in 1968. And I think he truly represented someone who, from my understanding of Lewis, which is pretty limited, he came from a relatively poor background in the Deep South. And he fought during the Freedom Rides, Freedom Summer. He just is really an inspiration for young people to get involved, no matter what your status is, whether you're born into nothing or whether you're born into a very rich and well-off family. John Lewis is a hero, and his legacy is definitely missed in Congress right now.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about John Lewis. I know a little bit about his story, and his is another kind of rags to riches thing. And the fact that he was able to be a civil rights leader, which was, you have no idea how divisive of an issue that was at the time. And then him being one of the most well-respected men in Congress, it's a very big deal.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, because I think in hindsight, we like to look back at the civil rights era and be like, well, yeah, it happened overnight and everyone all of a sudden accepted this change. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. John Lewis was almost killed by police. He was almost beat to death, probably multiple times. I would have to look into it more. And another thing that really inspires me about Lewis is that he never stopped fighting for the access to vote for all Americans until the day he died. In fact, many members in Congress are still trying to pass a bill that advances voting rights that's named after John Lewis. So that is frickin' cool.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Tom Brady.
I knew it.
Tom Brady. Now, I am not a Patriots fan. I'm not a Buccaneers fan. And I know this is a departure from our last one, right? We're going from John Lewis, who is a very serious American hero, to Tom Brady. Hear me out, though. Tom Brady was drafted in the 6th round of the NFL draft. For those of you who don't know, there's 7 rounds. So he was drafted almost at the bottom. He wasn't started in his rookie year. He was placed on the bench. The only reason he got a chance to play is because I believe his name was Drew Bledsoe, got injured. Okay. Tom Brady went on to become arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. He won 7 Super Bowls, and his tenacity to win represents the American spirit, or at least what it used to be. Brady, kind of like some of the stories we've talked about before, is a true underdog story. He came from nothing. He had a lot of people who discounted him, talking about his speed during the NFL Combine, talking about how he didn't have what it takes to become an NFL quarterback. Boy, were they wrong. In my mind, Brady's the greatest quarterback to ever play the game, and he's someone for young people who want to get involved, whether it's in sports or other competitive activities. I think young Americans can look up to Tom Brady, regardless of who discounts you in life. You know, you can really just put them aside and do what your heart desires.
Personally, I like Peyton Manning.
See, I'm a Broncos fan, so I love Peyton Manning too, but game recognizes game.
Yeah, I gotta, respect the rules, or what do they say? Respect the call,
Respect the call.
Yeah.
Tom Brady 012. All right. This is another one you got to hear me out. The Cold War was a difficult time.
The Cold War.
Just wait. The Cold War was a difficult time. The end of the 20th century was a difficult time. The beginning of the 21st century was a very difficult time, and we're still living through a difficult time. Since the 1990s, there's been one character that has been consistent in many Americans' living rooms, and that's Homer Simpson. I know this sounds stupid, but listen to me. Homer Simpson represents American creativity. Cartoon shows before the 1990s were almost unheard of, right? I could have put Matt Groening on here. Matt Groening, I don't know how you pronounce his name. He's the creator of The Simpsons. But I thought Homer Simpson represented something about America that Matt did not. Homer Simpson represents American comedy, right? It's stupid, yeah, but it's funny. And maybe Homer Simpson's not someone to look up to. But having time with family, and I don't think there's anything more American than family.
Yeah.
Or friends, right? Watching The Simpsons. Homer Simpson is the most iconic American TV character of all time. You look at him and you say, yeah, he's American. Case closed.
I actually, when I was making my rough draft of this, I included 3 fictional Americans. One was Jay Pritchett from Modern Family. The other was Lightning McQueen. And then, of course, the fabulous Hudson Hornet. I took them all out because I thought Daniel would say that I couldn't do those. If I had known this, my honorable mentions would look much different, and I probably would have included the fabulous Hudson Hornet in my top 10.
Why?
I like him.
Anything else?
Well, he's admirable. You know, he won 3 Piston Cups, and he only raced for 3 seasons. Then he had his big crash, and people said, all right, well, you're nothing to us now. So what did he do? He went out, he got a law degree, he got a medical degree. He went to a small town and started helping the people in that small town. What's American? Small towns. And he did so without going around saying, oh, look at me, I'm famous, I'm famous, I'm famous. That only came out once Lightning McQueen came over and told everybody. So the fact that he was humble and was able to help everybody in his community and live a superstar life for a little bit, I think says a lot about America. Plus the interstate highway system, but that's a whole different.
I like your answer. And to kind of add some more clarification to my Homer Simpson pick, if you've ever seen the Simpsons movie, you should go watch it if you haven't.
Most of them have.
Good. At the end of the Simpsons movie, spoiler alert, Homer saves the community of Springfield. Okay. Homer can be easily discouraged, as most of us can. And I think a lot of people discount him for being stupid. But he cares. He has a family. And at the end of the day, the thing he protects the most is his children, his wife, not so much his dad, and also the family pets. Homer Simpson is a true American dad. Thank you. My last pick on this list. I'm just speechless, really. Tom Cruise is the epitome of the American spirit. What can this man not do? He acts, he flies planes, he plays guitar. He's played in some of the most successful movies at the box office ever. And he's a darn cool dude. And that's what America needs sometimes, is a cool dude.
He has some pretty wild takes on spirituality. But
And
I mean, hey, it's American to, be tolerant of other religions, so I'm all for it.
And that's exactly another reason I put him on this list, is because I think a lot of people hear the name Tom Cruise and they're immediately disgusted. But I hear the name Tom Cruise and I'm immediately interested. And I think it's beautiful that someone who most people disagree with on spirituality is also one of the most successful actors in American history. How can that be possible? It's not in most places, but in America it is. And that's really beautiful when you think about it. I know this sounds stupid, but it's real. If you are in the minority in America today, I really hope that regardless of whether people agree with you, you can still succeed at following your dreams.
Yep.
All right. Let's talk about some honorable mentions. First, Elvis Presley. Now, there's a caveat here. Elvis Presley was great, but he stole a lot of music from African Americans. Elvis Presley is not the king of rock and roll. I would say Chuck Berry is. But Elvis Presley did do something that a lot of people never had. He had the courage to go on national TV and be himself. They called him Elvis the Pelvis. Next, MLK Jr. Nothing really needed here. One of the great Americans of all time. I simply did not put him on my top 10 list because I wanted to give John Lewis a shout out. Jackie Robinson, probably the first Black American to ever play baseball. I know some people dispute that, but most people agree that he's the first African American to play in the major leagues. He played for the Los Angeles Dodgers, or at that time it might have been the Brooklyn Dodgers. I can't remember. He would get spit on. He got thrown things at him when he was going up to bat, and he persevered and he became an American legend. That's awesome. James Stewart, one of the great American actors of all time. John Cena. Now this one's serious, okay? John Cena was my hero as a kid, and he prevented me from doing bad things. I was raised in a not so well-off family, and I had WWE to watch, and his message was hustle, loyalty, respect.
Your time is up, my time is now. You can't see me, my time is now. It's the franchise where I'm shining now.
And he encourages young people to rise above hate and to express themselves however they want to be expressed. I know he's a meme now.
See me, my time is now. In case you forgot or fell off, I'm still hot, knock your shell off. My money stacked fat, plus I can't turn the swell off. The franchise doing big business, I live this.
But John Cena is truly an American. And Martin Scorsese, one of the greatest American filmmakers of all time. That's my list. Thank you very much.
I also came very close to putting Jackie Robinson on my list.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'll start by giving some concluding remarks, and then I'll let Maddie take us home. Now, I understand that my list was not necessarily all serious. If I were doing a legitimate top 10 list of the greatest 10 Americans to ever live, it would look a lot different. My goal here was not only to be funny, but it was also to kind of get a well range of Americans, everyone from Colonel Sanders to John Lewis to Homer Simpson to Tom Cruise, kind of getting a good idea of what it really means to be American, the culture, the spirit, the tenacity, and the history, of course. And so I hope you had a good laugh, and I hope you can find something in one of these people to be inspired by and to go do great things with your life, because you can do it.
I have similar concluding remarks. I think that when you look at who are the greatest Americans of all time, you need to ask yourself, what does it mean to really be an American? And I think you could take anybody's story that we have gone over in this presentation and say that's what it means to be an American. But to be an American, is to pave your own path sometimes. Sometimes it does mean using resources available to you. Sometimes it's something as simple as making music and bringing joy to people, So to be an American, really, there is no one clear-cut answer, but I think my best advice on how to be a better American is to be the best version of yourself or try to improve upon yourself.
Fighting, plus I'm storming on you chumps like I'm thunder and lightning. Ain't no way you breaking me, kid. I'm harder than nails. Plus I keep it on lock like I'm part of the jail. I'm slaughtering stale.
Thank you. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to briefly touch on in anybody making a kind of top 10 list of anything, a lot of times it's subject to recency bias. So you might pick people that are much more recent in history. And that's why I tried to choose, and I think we both did this fairly effectively. You have to get people from the past. You can't look at America as it is today and say, okay, who's the best right now? So we both picked some historical figures. We both picked people of today. And in 30 years, if we were to make these lists over again, there's a good chance they'd be different. But I think that some of them, like John Lewis or Sojourner Truth, would likely still be on that list. But I think that's my remark. Yeah.
Now I have a question
Yeah.
because I have two, but I want to see if you do. After going through this list and having more time to think about it,
Mhm.
are there any other Americans that you would include in your honorable mentions?
I for sure would put John Lewis in there.
I can give my two real quick.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
so while I was, sitting here talking, and I did not prep for this at all. So yeah. I thought of two more Americans that I think could easily have gone in my top 10 if I would have thought of them. The first one is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is the GOAT of basketball. And just like Tom Brady, he inspires people to do the best that they can and work as hard as they can. And that's awesome. But my other one is Dolly Parton. So Maddie was just talking about making music and bringing joy to people. Dolly Parton, truly, if you want to talk about a rags to riches story, she grew up dirt poor. Dirt poor. She has a song called Coat of Many Colors that is beautiful, and it talks about her upbringing. She is now one of the most generous people in the music industry. She donates millions and millions of dollars. She has a children's book program that encourages young people to read, and she truly fosters creativity amongst younger artists. And so that's really cool. And I don't think there's anything more ideal about America than those two.
I think my other one would probably, now that I think about sports, would be Mia Hamm. Because women's sports have been, gaining popularity recently. And I would say that they have never been as popular as they are now, with Caitlin Clark coming about, the U.S. women's national team for soccer doing very well. And Mia Hamm, who was a soccer player and participated in the Olympics and everything, I think is the first big name as far as female athletes go that I can think of to pave the way for my favorites today, which are Rose Lavelle and Tierna Davidson.
That's awesome. And also, I would really encourage you, and this is being very serious, I would encourage you to think about, rather than going out and celebrating the 4th of July in some, I don't want to say meaningless, but some way that you're not going to remember. Let's just say that. I would encourage you all to think about some Americans that have sacrificed something or have created something that has really inspired you or enabled you to live a better life. And maybe you'll have a deeper appreciation for them. But I think above all, you might find a deeper appreciation for your own talents and further motivation that we live in a country where, for the most part, and I understand there's exceptions to this, you're free to do what you want. And regardless of whether you're born into abject poverty or whether you're born into riches, you can still do what you want to do, hopefully. And so use that as motivation and be you.
Yeah. Just like the slogan of the great Texas Tech University, from here, it's possible.
Shout out Texas.
Correct.
Shout out Missouri.
Shout out Missouri. Shout out. Oh, go ahead.
Shout out Alaska.
Oh. Shout out Daniel.
Shout out Maddie, my true favorite American.
Thank you.
Oh,
Oh.
also on the 4th of July, do not forget to thank those who have served in the U.S. military and our armed forces. Thank you for your service, Maddie. What are you laughing at?
I did nothing.
Not meaning to drag this out even more, but there are two more people I want to. Now that I think about it, there are two great baseball players Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams. What?
Okay.
They were both great American baseball players. And what did they do during World War II?
I don't know.
They gave up their baseball. They put their baseball careers. They are two of the best players in the league. They put their careers on hold for 3 years and they served in World War II.
Oh, I have a good one now.
That is freaking awesome. Selflessness.
Pat Tillman. Just like Sandra Day O'Connor went to Arizona State, Pat Tillman went to Arizona State. He was a fantastic strong safety. He was drafted to the Arizona Cardinals. He was making millions of dollars. 9/11 happened. He went to a recruiting station and he joined the Army. And unfortunately, he passed away during the War on Terror. But a great American, set aside millions to defend his country.
This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed.
Let us know what you want to see next week. Bye.
And I'm proud to be an American.